This chapter, chapter 2, begins on page 21 of your text. And if you want to go ahead and open to the chapter and use it as a guide for the lecture, feel free to do so. This chapter is going to focus on designing instruction and assessing learning. And we're going to be looking at some similarities and differences in several learning theories, as well as looking at effective technology that's related to assessment. Learning is developing new knowledge or new skills or new attitudes, and this is all done through the interaction between the individual and the environment. So to make learning happen, teachers have to consider the right mix of tools and strategies to bring into the learning environment for their students. Now, technology can contain some really great tools for such learning, and some positive aspects that technology brings to the learning environment are listed here in these bullets. So we're going to cover a variety of theories in this chapter, and we're going to begin with behaviorist theory. In the 1950s, B.F. Skinner, and you'll see him pictured here on the slide, began to develop his theory of behaviorism. He wanted to study how our voluntary behavior worked, and he believed that behavior could be shaped by reinforcing or rewarding the behavior that was desired. So he did a series of experiments with pigeons to prove his theory, and essentially he found that when pigeons were rewarded for their behavior, they would repeat that behavior. Now, this theory only relies on what can be observed, not what is going on inside the brain. Keep that in mind. That's going to be very different from other theories. This theory was very revolutionary at that time because it was based in logic. And it helps us understand how we could improve learning of basic knowledge or basic skills, but it didn't work for higher level skills. So then in the last part of the 20th century, we began to understand cognitivism. And cognitivists created a model of the learner that was based on how learners receive, process, and manipulate information. They based their theory on Piaget's work, and you see Piaget there. And he looked at how people think about problems and solve those problems. So this is quite a departure from behaviorism because it's based on what is happening inside the brain. Cognitivists looked at the model of short-term and long-term memory in the brain. So new information is stored in the short-term memory, and if that information is rehearsed, then it will move to the long-term memory. If it isn't rehearsed, then it's lost. So once information moves to the long-term memory, then it can be combined with skills, and the learner can then begin to solve problems. Now, this theory is a much broader view of learning compared to behaviorism. Then we have the constructivist approach, and this approach focuses on how learners make their own interpretation of the world and what they're learning. They believe that learning is situated in experiences. Constructivists think that learning is not just about a teacher dispensing facts, but instead creating a learning environment where learners can engage in tasks to apply their knowledge. Ultimately, this approach asks learners to use their existing knowledge and seek new knowledge to solve problems that are based in their experiences. So this is one teacher's view of constructivism, and when you're watching this, consider why she believes it's a valuable instructional strategy.
I suppose I was always was attracted to the idea of constructivism where the teacher is not the one who knows everything, that the students are creating knowledge together in a learning community. That's my understanding of constructivism, and that in a way my role as a teacher is to provide them with resources to answer questions, but not to tell them what to do or how to do it, or to what to think. It's really their idea of they've got to find out and then put it together in their own way.
Social psychology is the next theory we're going to examine in this chapter, and it focuses on the social organization of the classroom and how that impacts learning. The social organization of the classroom can include how we construct groupings for our students, how much control we allow students to have in their learning, and any reward structure we might be using related to learning. Now, Robert Slavin, you'll see him pictured here, believes that cooperative learning is much more effective for learning than competitive type learning or very individualistic learning. And he developed a set of techniques that can include small group collaboration, rewards based on a group achievement, and then instruction with the learner more in control. And all of that falls in line with this perspective or this theory. You'll find these principles listed here for effective instruction on page 24 and 25 of your text. Take a moment to read through them in the chapter and consider how you've seen them used in the classroom or how you have actually implemented these principles in your own lesson. So take a minute, maybe pause, read through those in the chapter, and think through how you've either seen them applied or you've applied them yourself. Here you're going to see the basic difference between information and instruction. And what you'll want to do is really look through and see how are they connected, but how are they very different. So don't make the mistake of thinking that dispensing information is instruction in and of itself. Bloom's taxonomy is a very important perspective of learning in the world of education. And this taxonomy focuses on different learning skills and at different levels, starting at knowledge and moving all the way up the scale. It's been revised and modified over time. And you'll see there it's also been connected to 21st century skills through the 4 C's that are listed there: critical thinking, communication, creativity, and collaboration. So the new approaches for facilitating learning through technology can be incorporated into Bloom's. So let's take a look at Bloom's taxonomy, and you can find all sorts of different images and graphs, charts online that can show you the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And then this is one example of how we can add technology to Bloom's taxonomy and see where are these technology-based tools falling on the taxonomy and how do they relate to it. These are our ISTE standards for students for effective technology use. Take a moment and scan those and begin to think about how do those relate to our lessons and how are we incorporating them into our quality lessons that where we're using technology to enhance. Gardner's theory focuses on multiple intelligences, and he identified 9 specific aspects of intelligence. You'll see those listed there. They're also in your text. And teachers can consider these different learning abilities with their students when they're thinking about their students' strengths and weaknesses. So, once you understand how some of your students learn better or have different strengths and weaknesses, then you can connect to better addressing their needs. And this moves us into the principles of effective media use, and that is rooted in media literacy skills. So consider what media literacy skills encompass and how to connect these skills with your lessons and to your students. Consider for a moment which one of these skills do you think are important for your students to know how to do? Now, this principle is going to share some ideas about the importance of helping students understand these media literacy skills.
Teaching kids to understand the power of having a voice in the world by being able to create media today and create words today and do all of that stuff. I think that changes the game, number one. Number two, the world is a lot less peer-reviewed than it used to be, and I think that teaching kids to read information and then critically analyze it for bias, for veracity, for all of those things, that has become a much, much more important skill today than it was 40 years ago.
So yours is going to be at a wrestling match? Web 2 wrestlers? Okay. So how are you going to talk about the difference between Web 1 and Web 2 with your wrestlers?
Well, it's probably Web 2 it's going to be Web 1.
So the moment you recognize the power of your own words or your own ability to tell a story in any number of media, your personal definition of information literacy changes completely. So I think we have to teach kids to analyze information. We've got to teach kids to be able to access information. We've got to teach kids to be able to judge information. We've got to teach kids to be able to synthesize different perspectives. And then we've got to teach kids what it means to create and collaborate on that and network their information to figure out how is it that my voice gets out there. Because I could just post yet another blog, but how is it that my voice becomes part of the discussion? And I think teaching kids also that notion of sort of information networking is also an incredibly important skill.
So consider how that relates to your students and how important do you think it is for your students to know how to use these skills?
When students are completing a lot of their research for history, I'm encouraging them to use their primary source documents versus relying on the myriad of secondary sources that now is available on the web. Although those are oftentimes very rich resources that allow them some perspective and context, I think also that providing students the tools to inquire, to analyze, to make meaning on their own out of the historical documents is incredibly valuable as they then try to make sense of the media and information that they receive today. When you throw in, a random search into a search engine, the first link that kicks isn't always necessarily a reliable or the best one. Do you have a way of kind of looking down the list and knowing where to go or what to look for to find those reliable sources?
I think it was ninth grade or in 10th grade that Martin Luther King Day was coming near, and our teacher said, okay, I want you to search Dr. Martin Luther King, and I want you to find 3 reliable sources. So, of course, there's the first source, and we're like, okay, this must be a really good source. Then we look at it, and it ended up, they were like, okay, you have to find the author of the page, the title, who's sponsoring the page, who's funding it, and what's it about. So it ended up being that the KKK was funding the page and was the one who actually put it up on the web. So we noticed that just because Google or any other search engine has that first link or the first couple of links up there, it's not because it's reliable. It's just because a lot of people click.
So, a lot of our students are going to be using online resources, and think about how those media literacy skills can help them navigate the wealth of resources that are out there and understand how to analyze those resources. Starting on page 32 of your chapter, you can see examples and explanation for different types of assessment. You see those listed here in this chart. Take some time and explore these different types of assessment and consider how the different types of assessment do actually assess differently. And then also consider how each type could relate back to the different aspects of the learning theories that we've discussed in this chapter, so that ultimately you can understand what is the best way for me to assess my students, what is the best assessment that's going to give me an understanding of their mastery. So that concludes us with chapter 2. Please check Schoology to see what else you are responsible for with this week and this chapter.